If you're witchy, spiritual, or into personal development or manifesting, chances are you've heard of law of attraction. But have you heard of the ultimate reality hacking technique, law of assumption? In my experience, working with the law of assumption has allowed me to manifest incredible things, completely shift my self-concept and day-to-day reality, and totally transform my life. When I tell you this is the ultimate reality hacking tool, I mean that shit. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to understand and master the law of assumption. We'll go over how it works, how it differs from law of attraction, and how it links to psychology, because as your psycho-spiritual bestie, you know it always comes down to mindset and magic with me. Make sure you watch till the end when we cover specific actionable tips such as the SATS technique for using law of assumption to manifest and create positive change in your life. I've also created a brief prompt workbook for you to download in the video description that can help you start using law of assumption today to shift your reality and manifest. By the end of this video, you will have a better understanding of law of assumption and how to use it to consistently and completely shift your reality in very powerful ways. If this sounds like a fuck yes for you, make sure to like and save this video. If you're new here, I'm Mandy M. I'm the author of Witchcraft Therapy, Happy Witch, and Feral Self-Care. I identify as more of a secular or skeptical leaning witch and spiritualist, and for that reason, the law of attraction never fully caught my fancy. Don't get me wrong, I still see its value, but I had a lot of bones to pick with it, and it wasn't until I fully understood law of assumption that I was able to tie all of this shit back to psychology and my knowledge of how the brain works, and then things really clicked for me. So what is the law of assumption? The law of assumption is essentially the concept that all is imagination and your beliefs dictate your reality. That is to say, your beliefs and your assumptions are what is reflected back to you in your world. That reality emerges from your consciousness, imagination, and emotion. If you understand the phrase self-fulfilling prophecy, this will give you a general sense, but a sense of law of assumption. Law of assumption was popularized by Neville Goddard, a speaker, author, and mystic in the New Thought movement. He believed that our reality was a byproduct of our beliefs, assumptions, and consciousness. The secret sauce for Neville was looking at the end result of what you're trying to manifest. Law of assumption states that you must assume that you already have what you want and practice feeling into it. So he called this the feeling of the wish fulfilled. By doing this, you can shift your being and internal state and hack your reality in alignment with those beliefs and those assumptions. In fact, diehard Neville acolytes will stick to his words and say this, that imagination is the only reality. This is a bit of a mindfuck since it is so far off what we are typically taught about how to view reality and our place in it. But to be fair, everything that we interact with and perceive, everything is filtered through the lens of our subjective conscious awareness. So the only thing we can actually know in a subjective way to be true is that our own consciousness exists. How's that for a mindfuck? There's a quote from Neville: "When man finally identifies himself with his imagination rather than his senses, he has at long last discovered the core of reality." So unlike law of attraction that states that you attract things from the universe that are congruent with your thoughts or positive/negative vibes, that's an oversimplification. The law of assumption asserts that you manifest things through consciousness, imagination, beliefs, feelings. These things are not coming from the outside attracting to you, they're directly emergent from your imagination and your beliefs. There's another quote by Neville that says, "It is not what you want you attract what you believe to be true." So with law of attraction, there can be this weird focus on positive thinking that can be a challenge for people like me who struggle with things like intrusive thoughts. This line of thinking, once unraveled, can go to some places that feel weirdly victim blaming and kind of like toxic at times, so it kind of gives the ick. However, with law of assumption, the focus is less on the thoughts or positive thinking and more about beliefs and assumption, and focusing in a disciplined way on the feeling of the wish fulfilled. So when you focus on the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you focus on the end state of your desire rather than the desire itself. When you focus on wanting something, you're actually only reinforcing that you don't habit. Now, most of us probably have examples of this already, and if you can think of one, make sure to drop it in the comments below to inspire others. Imagine you're a child and you have to do a presentation in front of the class, and you get nervous and you start telling yourself a story about how you're gonna mess it up or you're gonna choke in front of everybody. This assumption has an emotional resonance attached to it that you may have lived over and over and over and over in your imagination before you even have stepped foot in front of that class. Now, by the time you get up there, it's likely that you probably won't knock it out of the park, calm, cool, and collected, because you are living out the story that you already imagine. Alternately, when you listen to interviews with athletes or musicians or actors, you might begin to notice that they typically have something in common. Many of them take the time to imagine or visualize their performance before it happens and tell themselves a story or an assumption that they are going to succeed. Looking at this through the law of assumption, it becomes clear that these beliefs and this mental rehearsal is key for success. When thinking about manifesting from a space of consciousness and imagination, it might help to think of this. Everything that exists in the man-made world made it through the imagination to tangibly manifested in reality pipeline. This concept is really not as far-reaching or as out there as it may seem. All creations of man are imagination made manifest. So before we get into the specifics of how to start using this ASAP, I just wanted to touch on how this method actually jives with psychology to help satisfy any skeptic-ass folks like me. Although most new thought and manifestation ideas are considered to be pseudoscience, I personally really connected with law of assumption because it jives with some things we already know about psychology. For example, there's been a lot of research into things like positive thinking and self-esteem that really jive with this idea of law of assumption when it comes to your self-concept or what is true and possible for us through belief. Similarly, in law of assumption, leaning into the feeling of the wish fulfilled is encouraged. Using techniques such as visualization, meditation, affirmations, we can shift our self-concept, shift our ways of feeling and being, and become open to new and infinite possibilities. Psychological research has plenty of backing for all of those practices and how they influence us in powerful ways. So for example, they've done studies with athletes that show that visualizing games beforehand actually helps to improve performance. They've done studies that show the benefits of having positive self-esteem. Things like meditation have been proven to be so good for the mind, body, and spirit that even many Western medical doctors are starting to prescribe or recommend it to their patients. Also, our ideas of reality and consciousness are rapidly changing even when it comes to the world of science. I recently came across the work of a man named Donald Hoffman. Hoffman is a cognitive psychologist that theorized that reality as we experience it is emergent from consciousness rather than the idea that consciousness emerges from the brain or objective reality. This is definitely not my area of expertise, and I don't want to butcher his theories by talking out of turn here, but it felt important to note that more and more our understanding of the nature of reality and consciousness is expanding into somewhat strange and spooky territory. Being open-minded in these conditions is an asset. So how to use law of assumption? There are a few ways to tap into law of assumption to manifest the reality you want. In the description of the video, there's a downloadable prompt workbook to help you along the way, but here are some actionable steps. So number one, begin cultivating an open mindset that embraces the idea that if you can imagine something, it can manifest. Neville said, everything is you pushed out. Again, law of assumption states that imagination is the true reality. Number two, get clear on what it is you want and why. Set a specific, clear intention of what you are trying to manifest and what that would look and feel like. Get detailed. Number three, assume that this is already your reality. Take the time to close your eyes and imagine that this is already fact. Hold this vision until you feel it throughout your mind and your body. Let the feeling wash over you. Do this as much and as often as you can. The feeling of the wish fulfilled emerges from that. Number four, when crafting a clear vision of your intention and assumed reality, lean way into the feelings that come with it. Use a lot of sensory details. Practice experiencing this vision in bed right before you go to sleep during meditation meditation, in the bath, wherever. When you're relaxed, it can be far easier to make an impression on your subconscious mind. Neville's signature method is called SATS, which stands for state akin to sleep. This is when you do that visioning, when you are in that theta state. Number 5, work on your self-concept. Do your shadow work. Engage in identity shifting techniques and deprogramming yourself from limitations and feeling of unworthiness. You're an infinite soul in a human experience. If you're interested to learn more about identity shifting, the video that I released right before this one is all about that, so go check that out. Next step, affirm your new beliefs and assumptions often. This can be really challenging when the 3D reality is still serving some bullshit, but if you want to change your assumptions and beliefs about what is true and possible for you, it takes a lot of practice and checking yourself. So keep returning to that gateway of your imagination. Humans are psychologically hardwired to notice things that align with their existing beliefs. So if you are trying to shift negative or hopeless belief systems, you might have to get a little delulu and keep the faith. I personally used to struggle a lot with confidence and never thought I'd see the day that I'd be here on video on the internet or writing books that just anybody can go and pick apart. But I was able to do that by shifting my self-concept and choosing to believe and assume that I could do whatever I wanted without permission and without being limited by these beliefs that I already held. This took a lot of practice, patience, and perseverance. So Neville's work speaks of a mental diet, which is essentially when you stop paying attention to the things you don't want into your reality, which includes the shit you're telling yourself about yourself, and start paying more attention to the things you do want. If law of assumption feels compelling for you, I'd highly recommend diving in further by finding Neville's books or his lectures. There's a lot of them available here on YouTube, but he uses a lot of language that refers to God. So if that's a barrier for you, you could also check out Joseph Murphy. He's another New Thought teacher that uses a similar approach, sometimes referred to as law of belief. When using law of assumption, I want to make it clear that assuming your desired reality as fact is key. There's a saying that goes, where your attention goes, energy flows. This is your North Star when it comes to law of assumption philosophy. And remember, when you focus on a desire, you are really focusing on the lack of that thing. A desire is just a reinforcement that you don't yet have that thing. Law of assumption tasks us to assume and believe we already have that thing and use the imagination and emotion to let ourselves experience it energetically until the 3D reality can mirror that belief back to us. Make sure to download the prompts in the video description if you want to start utilizing this method. And if you're a slut for all things magic and mindset, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I love you. Happy manifesting.